Hello everybody, welcome back to another episode of Access Blockbusters Pod. Today is a very special episode because we have finally made it to the one and only movie of the MCU that's coming out in 2024. Guys, it is Deadpool and Wolverine. The film has finally arrived. I'm excited to talk about it with all of you. I have a lot of thoughts, a lot of things to get through here before we, sort of head on into the next bit of the MCU, but I'm just so excited to talk about it. So, hope you guys are enjoying, and hope you guys did enjoy Deadpool and Wolverine if you saw it. And yeah, guys, before we get into any of that, San Diego Comic-Con is just around the corner. In fact, by the time this podcast will be uploaded, San Diego Comic-Con should just be, or I should say the Marvel panel of San Diego Comic-Con will be in just a few hours. And so stay tuned on the channel if you're interested in coverage about all the different things that are announced, whether they announce the cast of Avengers 5 or 6, or the directors or the writers, or whether Deadpool 4 is going to happen, or anything like that. We will be having all of those things coming out on the channel later today. So make sure to stay tuned, subscribe to the Access Blockbusters YouTube channel for coverage about the future of Marvel. These panels, they never disappoint. We've had coverage on all sorts of different things on this channel, whether it's the announcement of Secret Invasion or it's the announcement of the Fantastic Four. We know that the cast is there at Comic-Con, so it's going to be really exciting, and I can't wait to share those announcements and my analysis with you guys. So that is coming up very soon. If you haven't subscribed to the Access Blockbusters YouTube channel, make sure to do so. Give this video a like if you're listening on YouTube, or if you're listening on Spotify, make sure to give it a rating and let me know what you think about the podcast. And let's get into Deadpool and Wolverine. So let's begin. This is mostly going to be a spoiler discussion, but for those of you who have not seen the film yet, I'm just going to take the first few minutes to, do a little bit of a non-spoiler discussion, basically just sort of reiterating some of my thoughts, but also expanding on them that I gave on the community tab when I gave my initial reaction. So from right on here, there's going to be no spoilers, and then I will very clearly delineate when the spoiler discussion will begin. There will be timestamps in the description as well. Okay, guys, so Deadpool and Wolverine. Obviously, this is one of the most anticipated films in the MCU. It had that kind of aura of a Spider-Man No Way Home with all the excitement. Just, surrounding Hugh Jackman returning to Wolverine alone. I mean, that is something that, who would have even thought after just the beautiful, such a poetic and heartbreaking, but beautiful ending to Logan. Who would have thought that Hugh Jackman, who is one of my favorite, if not my favorite, all-time actor, would return to one of the roles, the role that made him really the movie star that he is today. I mean, it's just incredible to see Hugh Jackman not only back, but wearing a comics accurate costume as well, which is just, it's awesome to see. So there's that, but then also, the multiverse saga, right? It's been pretty hit or miss. Some more misses than we're used to from the MCU, but it's afforded us films such as Spider-Man No Way Home, for example, which has really taken full advantage of all that the multiverse has to offer. And so we were promised big surprises, even in the trailers. I guess spoilers if you haven't seen any of the trailers, but the trailers are the trailers. So if you don't want to be spoiled at all, probably not the video or the podcast for you. But the trailers, we saw a bunch of legacy X-Men characters such as Sabretooth or Toad or Pyro, for example. And even in the latest one, again, if you haven't seen the latest trailer, click off right here. This is your last warning. We saw X-23 as well. So a lot of surprises, some emotion as well, I think, that we were not perhaps expecting from a Deadpool film that was promised from Kevin Feige, Ryan Reynolds, and the team over at Marvel. And it's a big deal, right? Because it's Deadpool coming into the MCU, potentially with Hugh Jackman as well. So it was very exciting. So I saw just now Deadpool and Wolverine. Here's what I will say about the film. So for all the jokes that Ryan Reynolds makes, and you see this in the trailers, it's not anything spoiled, where he says he is Marvel Jesus and he's going to save the MCU. I don't think this film on its own is enough to save the MCU, and I don't think that even if this film was perfect, and I don't think perhaps to the chagrin of many that this film is perfect, I don't think that would have been enough to save the MCU anyways. But what I will say is that this is a very entertaining film. I mean, what else do you expect? It's a Deadpool film. All the jokes are there. The rated R-ness of the film is there. All the scenes are very entertaining. The jokes mostly land. The action is pretty great. It's Ryan Reynolds and Hugh Jackman, both at just the returning to the peak of their characters. Ryan Reynolds playing that same Deadpool character so brilliantly that made him so popular amongst the Marvel fans with the original Deadpool in 2016 and then Deadpool 2 in 2018. That's amazing to see. Hugh Jackman playing a different kind of version of Wolverine that I won't talk about here, but playing it as well as he always does with Wolverine characters. He's, I think, really gotten to play a few different versions of the character now, even though the previous ones were sort of in the same timeline. But, the Logan one is a little bit different than the one from X-Men 1 and 2 and 3. And this is yet another different version that he plays extremely well. They're just so great. They're great together. Obviously, the chemistry that they have together, it's so clear how much fun they had making this film. And they really shine as well. And while, this film, the best word that I would describe this film is entertaining, which some might, take it to mean that I didn't think the film was all that particularly deep or profound or anything. And it's not really, that's not really what this film is, because, Kevin Feige was promising a super emotional, not super emotional, but, a really wholesome, much more emotional film. And I mean, yes, there are moments, I will say, that, are not necessarily emotional. Like, I never found myself really close to tears or anything like that throughout the film. There are very clear moments of pathos and moments that are paying off arcs, right? And character moments that I really did appreciate. So while I won't say that, the film is super emotional per se, I think that there are several moments throughout the film, here and there, where the characters are allowed to breathe a little bit, and those were particularly satisfying, is the word that I would use. So, there's a few moments where the characters are allowed to breathe and really speak to the audience. Not, well, I mean, sometimes directly through the fourth wall, but, mostly just through their emotions and what they're going through. There are, of course, some really fun surprises as well. I think that the film did a really good job of making sure that the surprises did not overwhelm the movie, and made it so that, that it's not like the film is just there to be a cameo fest. I mean, there are, of course, cameos, and there are, of course, surprises, but they do work pretty well in the film, I will say. So that is that. Now, like I said, the film is not perfect. There are some things that I had some issues with, particularly on perhaps the flow of the story a little bit, once you kind of think about it, and especially kind of where they end up at the end. I'm not talking about the ending. I'm just talking about the third act in general, like how the third act is kind of set up here. But at the end of the day, I don't think I was expecting this film to kind of topple my upper echelon of the Black Panther films and the Infinity War and Endgame films and the Spider-Man trilogy from the MCU. And it certainly doesn't. But at the same time, what it does do is it provides a very entertaining film with two actors that are incredibly charismatic, that I can't wait to hopefully see again at some point in the MCU, throughout the multiverse saga. And it's a good step, right? I think that, like I said, this film alone was not going to save the MCU at any point, on its own, but it's a good step in the right direction. I think that, there are things in here that hint towards possible futures, and I think that if Captain America Brave New World continues to build off of this film, and then Thunderbolts continues to build off of that, Fantastic Four off of that, I think that while I think a lot of us have been disappointed with the multiverse saga, I think that we'll at least be able to attempt to wrap it up in a way that's satisfying, and at least a little bit gratifying to the fans. So yeah, those are my quick non-spoiler thoughts for Deadpool and Wolverine, and we are now going to quickly transition into the spoiler part of this discussion, which is going to be the vast majority of this podcast episode. So if you have not seen Deadpool and Wolverine, make sure to go out and see it. I would recommend it. Very fun time, especially if you're an MCU fan, especially if you're a fan of the Fox Marvel properties as well, which I was a big fan of, and a lot of the things in there were really fun to see. So yeah, make sure to go and see it, and then come back to this portion of the podcast once you have. So there is going to be a quick 1, 2, 3 countdown, and then we are going to head into the spoiler section. So this is your last chance. We're going to go 1, 2, 3. All right, guys, welcome to the official spoiler discussion, the spoiler part of this video for Deadpool and Wolverine. Like I said, if you haven't seen Deadpool and Wolverine, then we are going to be discussing full spoilers. So here we go. I've also marked the timestamp in the description down below. So if you've clicked here, then welcome, and let's talk all things Deadpool and Wolverine. So I want to start out by some of the things that stood out to me, especially, in a positive light. We'll talk about some of my problems with the film later on. But first of all, just want to say the action is tremendous for the most part. I think that especially that opening action scene with Deadpool dancing to NSYNC, which I don't know, is just so Deadpool and so stylized and pretty bloody, pretty gory, but really fun. Just the way that the camera is moving also with Deadpool, I found for the most part to be just such a nice change, if that makes sense, to some of the MCU action as well. It feels like the camera is really following the characters and kind of, working with the characters and their strengths, if you will, which I think is really fun. A lot of creative choices. Obviously, you saw in the trailers the scene where they're fighting in front of the 20th Century Fox logo and Deadpool is loading up his guns, which I think, again, just really creative shots, right? A lot of overhead shots, a lot of scenes that were definitely filmed in real locations, and that's one very clear thing, right? Is that none of this feels like it was filmed in the volume. It feels like it was very authentic and real. Sometimes a little bit to its detriment. Like I think it kind of limited itself a little bit by its locations because they spend a lot of time in the void. And then they, even in the void, they're just in a forest somewhere. At the beginning, I mean, they're in the TVA, and then at the beginning, they're kind of in the that forest where Logan's body is, and then at the end, they're kind of on the streets. I don't know where they are actually. I totally forgot. But anyways, yeah. So they're in the streets. I think, is that New York? I could be wrong. Anyways, so yeah, it's it's a lot of the action can get a little bit much sometimes, especially I think like when we get to the point of the film where they're teaming up with Elektra, Blade, X-23 and Gambit. I think the action gets a little bit much there because I think it's a lot better in those scenes where you're just following Deadpool or you're following Deadpool against Wolverine. I will say I did prefer the first fight between the two characters, between Deadpool and Wolverine when they were in front of the 20th Century logo, because I do think the car scene was just a little bit much, not in terms of the violence or anything, but in terms of I guess its placement in the story. Like it felt like Wolverine was just the writers were just trying to provoke Deadpool in that scene to get another fight out of them, which was fun. Admittedly, of course, it was very, very fun. We got that quick cameo of The Greatest Showman, which is amazing. I love The Greatest Showman. Love Hugh Jackman in it. But yeah, that scene felt a little bit I won't say unnecessary. Maybe unnecessary, but I really enjoyed the fight scenes for the most part. Side note, by the way, in my theater, and I want I'm hoping you guys will let me know in the comments down below. There was at least one, if not a couple, really young kids in the audience, and I kind of in the back of my head, as the film was starting, went, is this gonna be really the rated R, or is it gonna be kind of bloody in this, in the MCU sense of bloody rated R? No, it's definitely rated R. And after the film was over, I was just kind of sitting there going, those parents have just a ton of explaining to do to their kids after seeing that film. I don't know. I let me know in the comments down below if you guys have had similar experiences as well, where young kids, and I mean young kids, like maybe, I don't know, 5 to 10 age range. So yeah, definitely not a great place to bring them. But anyways, I digress. So there's the action. The humor, obviously it's a Deadpool film, worked really well. Some of my favorite jokes that I can remember off the top of my head, the short Wolverine, super funny. That was awesome. A lot of the jokes made at Gambit's expense, which is so funny. The scene with Happy Hogan I thought was just amazing. Just because of all the subtle, digs and oh, is RDJ gonna come, cameo? But no, he didn't. The whole Logan's grave scene where he's fighting with the adamantium skeleton, Dogpool, all the Deadpool variants. It's the humor is Deadpool humor. I mean, what can you say, right? That hasn't been said before. If you were worried that the Deadpool humor wasn't gonna work, then definitely don't be afraid, because this is peak Deadpool. The humor was fantastic. I apologize if I don't have all the best jokes. You'll have to let me know what some of your favorite jokes were in the comments, because I'm doing this pretty much as soon as I finish seeing the film, and obviously I'm not in the theater in the dark taking notes. I'm just trying to enjoy the movie for what it is. So there is that. Let's get into the story a little bit though. So obviously you have what was set up in the trailers, which is that somehow, and we find out why. We don't really find out why. Well, we do and we don't, right? So we find out a little bit about why Wade's world is being destroyed, because its anchor being, who is Logan, was killed, which is interesting. And we will get to the TVA in just a second. But so Wade's universe, I believe it was 10005, something like that. Anyways, is being destroyed because its anchor being was destroyed, and that's slowly desecrating and destroying the universe. And so Wade is on a mission basically to save his world because of his family. They're kind of shipped off to the void, side quests so that Wade can get back. There's this time ripper thing, which is a MacGuffin, and then the ending is basically matter and antimatter, and all that kind of stuff. And look, I mean, I think personally the story was definitely the weakest part of the film, because I think as you kind of lay it out, right? Because, okay, so the whole point is, yes, Deadpool's world is collapsing on itself, and I know they called out, but just because you call out the fact that the Time Ripper is this weird MacGuffin device, doesn't make it any less of a MacGuffin device, right? I think that the sidetrack trip to the void is fun. I mean, it's of course it's fun, right? And you get the undercurrents of Wade being like, I need to save my world, But it's basically, trying to get from point A to point B. You have 72 hours to do so. They get completely sidetracked somewhere else, which is, I suppose, it is what a buddy cop film is. But when you kind of boil down the film to what it is, the story at least, it's a little bit lackluster to me, especially because the ending is just sort of, let's shut down this device and no, they could die and whatever. And then they don't, obviously, because it's Deadpool and Wolverine. Although I will say that ending scene, like I mentioned in the non-spoiler part, I didn't get super emotional at any point in the film, but I thought that the ending, where they're together and they're pulling the matter, the matter and the antimatter and all that kind of stuff, and they're going through those flashbacks through their heads about all the things that they've been through as characters, I actually thought that moment was super effective. Really, when I talk about satisfying moments, that's definitely one of those really satisfying moments. I enjoyed that quite a bit. And that kind of pulled together what was otherwise maybe a little bit of a weaker story, in my opinion. Now, look, does that mean, before I get any further, that this film is a failure on that part because the story is kind of weak? No, because I think the film was setting out to do a couple other things, right? And, if it's a buddy cop kind of film, if the film is setting out to really entertain you along the way, then I don't think it's a huge problem, honestly, that the story is perhaps not the film's strongest suit. So I just think that if you kind of lay it out here, the story is certainly, it wasn't my favorite part of the film, but it's kind of covered up by all these other things going on. We will get to the TVA in just a second, but I wanted to touch on, speaking of weaker parts of the film and speaking of the story, Cassandra Nova as a character. Look, I think Emma Corrin did a fine job, and there's a lot, they allude to these parts of her backstory in the comics with this character, where she is Charles Xavier's twin, basically killed him in the womb, and all that kind of stuff. And they begin to hint at this in a scene between her and Logan, where she's talking about the fact that Charles never paid attention to her, or all that kind of stuff, because, Hugh Jackman, Wolverine, says something like, Charles loved us all and whatever, and he loved everybody. And then she says something like, I wish, must be nice, or something like that. And that's, those are the beginnings of a character motivation right there that were never really fleshed out, right? Because she's just kind of the villain to be the villain. And you could argue that Matthew Macfadyen's Paradox is a villain as well. He's just kind of, some guy kind of working under the bureaucracy. I did enjoy that part of it, I will say. Would have been kind of fun to see Owen Wilson's Mobius, be the one to go with B-15. It was nice to see her as well from Loki. But, it would have been kind of fun to see him go in as well at the end. And it is kind of an interesting thing to see a rogue division in the TVA. I did enjoy that. So he is also another antagonist in the film. But again, kind of underwhelmed by the antagonist, because I think they were just kind of there to be disruptive. And then all of a sudden Cassandra's like, I want to rule the void. And it's like, okay, so let's kind of explore that. Why do you want to, all this power and all this kind of stuff? And you can kind of go into her insecurities about being Charles' sister and all this kind of stuff. But instead they didn't really do any of that. So it was a little disappointing on that end. Now, in terms of the TVA, I'd be very interested to hear if any of you guys, and I doubt it, my audience seems very well caught up with the Marvel Cinematic Universe, but if there was anybody who didn't watch Loki, I'd be interested to hear if the film did enough to kind of talk about and catch people up on what the TVA is, perhaps, or what's going on there. Because I think that, I take a lot of the visual language for granted, like, pruning people or the time doors or whatever, like, all the retro tech in the TVA. But I'm wondering if people were just utterly confused if they hadn't seen Loki, or if they were able to kind of catch up with it. I think, it is nice to see a little bit of that synergy going on, where you can tell that this is a little bit of a different TVA, right? this is one post Loki and Yggdrasil where he's talking about we don't prune people anymore and all that kind of stuff. Would have liked a little bit more of an explanation, perhaps a little bit of a side screen where you did see Yggdrasil. And this is where, again, it's Marvel's lack of continuity with the multiverse that's coming in. They make fun of the multiverse and all this kind of stuff. But, it still doesn't change the fact that, you're not really being entirely consistent here because, the timeline branches, I suppose they look a little bit more like branches of a tree, but it's not really, unless I missed it. If I missed it, please let me know in the comments down below. But it's not really, referencing the world tree or what's going on there with the God of Stories Loki. And the other thing, too, is going back to this anchor being idea, yet another term that I heard that term and I was like, this is frustrating because you've introduced all these different points in almost every single different property that has dealt with the multiverse has a different terminology, right? So in WandaVision, it was nexus being, okay. In What If, it was absolute point. And then in Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness, they had another term for it. And now it's anchor being. And what does it mean? Like, is it all different? Like, is a nexus being different than an anchor being? And what's frustrating to me is that it feels like almost every single property that's dealing with the TVA or dealing with the multiverse in some kind of way is just creating up, making up different MacGuffins or different plot devices to kind of get through what their story wants to tell. And I guess it's fine, but at a certain point, as Chiwetel 4's Mordo says, the bill comes due, right? Eventually, you're going to need the TVA to be a part of whatever Secret Wars or, Avengers 5 is going on. And you're going to need to explain what all these things are. And I just don't know. I don't know what is going to happen there. I mean, fine to have anchor beings in this film and nexus beings in another universe or another film in the universe. I don't know what to make out of it. I am glad. I've been asking for synergy for a long time. It's finally happening. You have a film, with the TVA, right? Deadpool and Wolverine, and then the next film is dealing with Tiamat. So finally, there's some synergy. The film after that is dealing with crossovers with a lot of different characters, like Red Guardian with Yelena, Taskmaster. Or I guess those are all just Black Widow characters, but also U.S. Agent, Val, obviously, Bucky. So that's really exciting as well. So it's finally seeming like the MCU is kind of coalescing around a vision. We will see, no pun intended, by the way, with vision. We will see what Marvel's plans are at Comic-Con, and we'll be covering that on the channel, like I mentioned before. So yeah, I just wanted to talk about the TVA just briefly. With regards to the ending. And the future, it looks like we're setting up a universe. Now, I was a little surprised because I was thinking that at the end of this film, and it's interesting because the credits, right? Not the credits scene, which is just a fun little gag. It's not really that important. But it's interesting because during the credits, they have all these behind the scenes montages of the original Fox universe films, which I loved, by the way. I thought that was awesome. I hope that they post that on YouTube at some point or somewhere. Right, I think it's fantastic. But it seems like, and Ryan Reynolds' Deadpool says this during the film. He says goodbye Fox. So it felt like a goodbye to that universe, right? But then the whole point of this film, and I kind of thought the way that they were going to go is that he was just going to bring those 9 people into a different universe, or somehow everyone was going to transfer into another universe or something like that. Instead, at the end of the film. And this isn't necessarily a negative thing. It's just sort of me wondering what the future is, with these characters. Because to my recollection, it didn't say Deadpool and Wolverine will return, which I'm sure they will, but it didn't say that, right? I thought that this Fox universe was going to die, which was sort of, I guess, the implication, right, behind this whole thing, that they were going to kill the Fox universe. Instead, the Fox universe is very much intact, which I think is super interesting. Don't know what's going on there. Or maybe it's not the Fox universe, but no, it is. It is the Fox universe because Logan dying was the anchor point, which is super interesting to me. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things going on there that I'm a little bit confused by. Also, I think Logan takes place in like 2039 or something like that, 2034. And it's only been 6 years. So anyways, there's a lot of time shenanigans going on there. But yeah, I mean, in terms of just implications for the future, I'm sure we'll find out at Comic-Con for sure. Maybe they announced Deadpool 4. Maybe they announced Ryan Reynolds and Hugh Jackman for Avengers Secret Wars, whatever. Also now, with the inclusion of, I guess, Daphne Keane, which I'm super thrilled about because she I don't know if at the time that they did Logan when she was 11 years old, the actress Daphne Keane, I don't know if I was super keen on her, especially that version of the character who was more silent, and kind of a child, like a feral animal version of that Wolverine. Wasn't really sure if I wanted to see, because I know they were going to make an X-23 solo film or something like that. I wasn't entirely sure if I thought that that's what needed to come out after Logan, but now seeing, an older Daphne Keane, obviously she's done some amazing work since Logan, which also she did amazing work in. I'm really excited that she's back, and I hope that this means she gets to be a part of whatever is going on in the multiverse as well, because she deserves it. I mean, it's just incredible. Obviously, Logan, for those of you who have been on my channel, know is one of my all-time favorite films in the MCU. Not in the MCU, I guess kind of in the MCU, but in the Marvel universe. And obviously Daphne Keane was a huge part of it as well. So I'm just so thrilled that potentially she could be back. And speaking of being back, let's talk about the multiverse saga, because while they don't explicitly make mention, or I guess they kind of do, I think that the biggest thing here, biggest takeaway from the multiverse saga, because we knew that Deadpool was going to make fun of Marvel. And it's funny because he jabs at Hugh Jackman a couple times, like Disney's going to make you do this until you're 90, that kind of thing, which I don't know if it's until he's 90, probably until Secret Wars, but anyways, there is that. But also, there's another line there where he says you're coming into the MCU at a low point, which I think is really funny. And then also, and this is really where I wanted to talk about this, is because right before he talks to the Deadpool variants, he talks about how, we're trying to do this multiverse thing and it's not working, so let's just wrap it up here, right? And I think that is actually very quietly kind of telling, right? Because I know that Kevin Feige said in an interview, he's like, oh no, of course we'll let Ryan make fun of us and whatever. He's not just going to let Ryan make fun of the MCU if it's just sort of not true. And does that make sense, right? It's not like, for example, if Kevin Feige doesn't believe something that Ryan Reynolds, believes, for example, like if Ryan Reynolds writes in the script for Deadpool and Wolverine, he's like, Eternals is such a terrible movie, whatever. And then he has Deadpool say, oh, and, we did that Eternals film and it sucked. I don't think Kevin Feige would have put that in the film. Because I don't think that he thinks that that's true, for example, just as an example, right? And so by having Ryan Reynolds' Deadpool say, we're doing this multiverse saga, it's not really working, time to wrap it up, I have a sneaking suspicion then they're going to really kind of try to accelerate through Avengers 5, through Avengers 6, wrap it up, which is what I've been advocating for, honestly, because while I've enjoyed more of the multiverse saga than I think most kind of disgruntled MCU fans have, it's time to wrap it up. And the reason I say that is because you have in this film such a rich tapestry of mutants. I love the mutants, and the mutant saga is just sitting there waiting for you. So go for it. Whatever it takes, do an alternate universe coming into the Earth 616, whatever. Whatever it takes to kind of get past this and move towards that point, I would be all for. So yeah. There's that. In terms of other surprises, obviously you have the team. We knew a long time ago that Elektra was coming in. I totally forgot as I was watching the film that she was coming. So when she came, it was really fun to see her. X-23, we saw in the trailer, kind of figured she would be in there. I kind of wish that, I hadn't known. But anyways, it would have been even cooler if she had come in and I didn't know. But anyways, Gambit was something that I thought, yeah, probably, like maybe if they're going to have all these cameos, and sure enough, Gambit shows up. And Blade was really interesting because Blade was I was not expecting Blade, not in the slightest. And it's funny because Wesley Snipes and Ryan Reynolds kind of have a history with Blade Trinity, where apparently Wesley Snipes was a little bit difficult to work with. So it's just kind of funny to see, him reemerging as Blade, especially given all of the production delays and problems with the current MCU Blade film. So I thought that the team worked really well because also they worked really well in the context of the film, that they are the team that needs to take down the Cassandra Nova base. I thought that was really fun. Other surprises, I actually thought it was kind of weird that we didn't get Lady Pool and Cowboy Pool unmasked, given that it's confirmed in the credits, and it's confirmed, I looked online, that Lady Pool was Blake Lively, so no Taylor Swift. Sorry, Swifties, if you're out there listening to this video or this podcast, sorry. And then Cowboy Pool, I think it was pretty obvious from the first, the moment he opened his mouth, was Matthew McConaughey. Kind of confused as to why they didn't unmask them, because if you're going to get these people, maybe they were just doing the voice. If that's the case, fine. Maybe have Ryan Reynolds kind of make fun of that or something like that. I don't know. Because he made fun of the budget a couple times, which I think was really funny. But yeah, I don't know. I thought that it was fine. Like, it wasn't like, that the fact that they didn't reveal it until the credits was a big deal. But it was just something that I thought they should have done. And then obviously, well, you saw all the different X-Men characters that were in the trailer, and even more were there, Juggernaut and all that. And then you had Henry Cavill's Wolverine, which I thought was just so funny. Also, Henry Cavill is huge. My goodness. If you didn't think he could physically pull off being Wolverine before, and maybe it's a hint, I don't know. Probably not. It's probably a John Krasinski, Mr. Fantastic kind of thing going on there. But who knows? Maybe Henry Cavill will be the Wolverine. I don't know. Maybe. He looked massive. Oh my goodness. But yeah, Henry Cavill as Wolverine. That was fun. And then obviously, Chris Evans as the Human Torch. As soon as he popped up on screen, obviously huge surprise. But also I knew that's not Cap. That's Human Torch. And I loved the joke where Deadpool was like, oh my gosh, he's gonna say it Avengers, and then he says flame on, and I thought just so funny, so funny. And he wasn't in the film for a short amount of time either. It was probably 10, maybe even close to 15 minutes as well of screen time, and I just thought that was awesome. So yeah, overall, I mean, like I said, the story was perhaps my least favorite part of the film, as well as the villains, but everything else, the humor, the action, the surprises, the entertainment value, Hugh Jackman returning as Wolverine. I mean, what else could you ask for from a film like this? This isn't asking to be an Oscar-nominated film or anything like that, and I think that that's totally okay. So to wrap up this episode of the Access Blockbusters Pod, I wanted to go back and quickly go through my predictions from last week, and talk about what I got wrong, how my expectations actually turned out, and then we'll wrap up this podcast episode. And guys, like I said before, stay tuned for San Diego Comic-Con coverage on the channel. I'm so excited to see what Marvel has in store for us later on. So, in last week's episode, the Deadpool and Wolverine preview, I basically did what I was worried about, what I was curious about, what I was excited about, and then some bold predictions. We're going to skip the excited about part, because the excited about part was just all the things that, I think everything that I was excited about really came to fruition, like the action, the Deadpoolness, the Hugh Jackman coming back. I think all of that came to fruition. So, if you want to check out what I was excited about, go check out the podcast episode from last week. That's where I talk about all of that. But what I wanted to do in today's episode to wrap up is go through what I was worried about and see if those concerns kind of panned out, what I was curious about, and then see, how things actually happened. And then my bold predictions. I didn't do particularly well, and that's totally fine. If all my predictions came true, it'd be totally boring, So yeah, but we'll go through and see how well I did there. So going through what I was worried about, I was worried it was going to be too much, like cameos everywhere and needless cameos everywhere, which, I think the Illuminati cameos in Multiverse of Madness, they were fine. They served a purpose, right? It wasn't just popping up for no reason and then going away. A little bit unnecessary, sure, but, it was fine for the film. And I will say that I think Deadpool and Wolverine pulled it off for the most part, because at the end of the day, what I came out of was a Deadpool and Wolverine film. With a bunch of little, supporting characters here and there. I don't even think they were cameos for the most part. I think Chris Evans as Human Torch was definitely a supporting character. I think that obviously the team, Gambit, Blade, X-23, and Gambit, Elektra, Gambit, Blade, and X-23 were definitely a part of the story as well. And then the team of old X-Men characters were just sort of I feel bad calling them cannon fodder, because they were big parts of the original films. But anyways, yeah. I think that it in terms of feeling too much, I was very satisfied coming out of this film that, no, this is definitely a Deadpool and Wolverine film. I was also worried that it was going to be too silly. And honestly, it's really silly. It does not take itself seriously, but I think it does so in the vein of the original two Deadpool films. And I think that, it has enough sincere moments, especially at the end where they're, trading sacrifices and all that kind of stuff, between Deadpool and Wolverine. And I think that worked really well. So no, I think that it definitely was not something that kind of came out poorly. Then the third thing I was worried about was the Void. And here's what I will say about the Void, because I was a little bit worried that it was going to turn into an Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania situation, where you're just in the quantum realm the entire film, and the quantum realm is not an interesting setting. And look, I don't think the Void is a particularly interesting setting. It looks better than it did in Loki, because they actually filmed on real locations, and you remember all the set photos that were leaking with the 20th Century Fox logo and whatnot. It's not my favorite location. I don't particularly think, other than the TVA maybe, which was fun, that any of the locations here were particularly interesting, just aesthetically, right? Like the streets, at the end when they're fighting, or that bunker where they're fighting, or I don't know, at the beginning. I think the forest where Deadpool is fighting the TVA agents was really fun, kind of a more vibrant setting. But otherwise, I don't think any of the settings were particularly interesting. That being said, it didn't necessarily take away from my entertainment value from the film. So I'm gonna say that while, I could have done with a little bit less of the voidiness of it all. I wasn't particularly bothered by it at the end of the day. So there's that. In terms of what I was curious about Cassandra Nova. Turned out not much of anything, so a little bit disappointed about that. The variants. Well, the Deadpools and Wolverines. I think they handled them pretty perfectly. I think the Deadpool core were a little bit silly at the end. I think it's really funny that they all latched on to Peter, though. I think that was a really funny way to end that scene. But I did love the Wolverine montage because that was perfect, right? It was just a perfect way to get in some fun Wolverine variants, especially the short one, the Henry Cavill one. Those are the ones that stood out to me. Really, 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 really fun. Also to kind of highlight the fact that this is the quote-unquote worst Wolverine, which I think that was a really important part of the film as well. And then finally, how it fits and how Deadpool can integrate into the MCU. I mean, it fits. It's interesting, right? Because, you have that scene on Earth 616, which I don't even know how he got there. Using that time thing from Cable, I guess. I really don't know how he got there, honestly. But because that was like 2018, right? And I don't know. It was Earth 616, so I really couldn't tell you. And like we talked about earlier for the ending, I don't really know where we go from here. Like at the beginning of Avengers 5, does that world get destroyed again and then get pulled out? I don't know, because I think what you're hinting at, right? What Cassandra Nova's plan was to destroy all the worlds and then just have the void. And my suspicion is that is where we're going. That is what Battle World or Secret Wars is going to look like. I just don't know when and how that's going to happen, if that makes sense. So I think we were hinting at that. But yeah, I don't know. So it's still something I'm a little bit curious about, to see how Deadpool actually fits into the MCU. So that was what I was curious about. We talked about how things that I was excited about that all pretty much panned out. And now let's get to my bold predictions. I made 6 bold predictions here, and let's talk about whether or not I got them right before we close out the episode. So my first bold prediction is that the ending is the most important of any MCU project in setting up Secret Wars, either setting up the villain or Battle World or something like that. Obviously, we won't know the answer to this until the end of Secret Wars itself, I suppose, or at least the film that comes right before Secret Wars. I'm going to say I got this wrong. I think even Doctor Strange 2, without even having seen a Doctor Strange 3 or where that credit scene goes, I think is probably much more important to Secret Wars than this film was. I just kind of thought that Deadpool might end up in a different universe or might end up in Battle World or something like that. Turns out he just completely ends up in the same universe, the 616 universe, which, okay, I mean, sure, that's fine. So no, this one definitely I got wrong. So I am 0 for 1. Second prediction is that it's the most emotional Deadpool film. And I said I wasn't particularly emotional throughout the film. I was more satisfied with certain moments, but then again, I was never really emotional in any of the other Deadpool films, and I think that this film at least had more to do with kind of loss and trauma in that way. So you can let me know in the comments down below if you disagree with me. I'll give myself this one, although it's not as ringing of an endorsement as I thought it would be. I thought I would come out of the film being like, oh yeah, like what, really emotional ending or, really great scenes. I think that the scene where Logan is talking to Cassandra in his head about what he did to the X-Men was quite well acted by Hugh Jackman, but it also felt like we were just rehashing and retreading old ground there a little bit. So I'll give this one to myself, but not super strongly. So 1 for 2. The third prediction I made is that it will answer big MCU questions through humor. So I was envisioning Wade Wilson kind of making fun of the fact that the Celestials haven't been seen for a while, or the guy who bought Avengers Tower, or Midnight Suns, or whatever. I'm not going to say I got this one right. I mean, he made a couple jabs at Marvel, obviously. I guess the biggest question that it answered is the fact that we are going to be wrapping up the multiverse saga soon, I think. If you make that joke in the film and you don't, and it lasts for another 5 years, I don't even know what to say. So no, I did not get this one right. I am 1 for 3. Next one, Wolverine versus Hulk. I don't quite know what to do with this one because we didn't actually see Wolverine versus Hulk. We got hints of it. We got a big hint of it, obviously, when he was jumping around different universes. I'm going to give myself a half point for this because, I mean, it was happening in that universe, but we didn't get to see it, which was unfortunate. I know it wouldn't have served the story at all. I kind of wish he jumped in mid-fight, maybe, instead of, right before the fight started, but whatever. So, yeah, I'll give myself a half point, and I'll say 1.5 out of 4. So, yeah, there's that. Number 5, Deadpool does not join Earth 616 at the end of the movie. So, because the whole point of the trailers and stuff was, Wade wants to be an Avenger, and Wade wants to join the MCU proper. And so I kind of thought maybe he'll just end up in a different universe, or he'll end up on Battleworld. I wasn't really predicting that Wade would just stay right where he is in the Fox universe, but yeah, I got this one right. So yeah, there you go. 2.5 for 5, 50%. Not bad, not bad. And finally, it makes $1 billion. Look, we haven't seen those results. We haven't even seen the opening weekend. This is coming out on the Saturday of the opening weekend, so I have no idea whether or not it made $1 billion. But I'll go out on a limb and say I got this one right, because based on the opening tracking numbers and everything like that, I just cannot imagine this film not making $1 billion. I don't know. It's doing well critically. Like I said, is this the best MCU movie ever made? No, but it's really entertaining. It has repeat watch value. I'm certainly going to go watch it again at some point, and I think it's going to cruise to $1 billion. So I'm tentatively going to say I got 3.5 out of 6. It could be 2.5, but we'll have to see about that. And guys, that is it for our quick non-spoiler, and then lengthy spoiler discussion for Deadpool and Wolverine. Let me know in the comments down below what you thought about this film, and what were your favorite parts about it, and what did you like, what did you not like, whether you agree or disagree with me. I'd love to hear in the comments down below. Like I said, we'll be right back on the channel to talk about all things Comic-Con, San Diego Comic-Con. Hopefully I'll be able to put out little individual news videos as they come out, as I have done in previous years. If not, stay tuned for a longer podcast episode, so hopefully I'll be able to do those news videos and a podcast. But if not, look for either one of those where I talk about everything that happened at Comic-Con this year. It's going to be exciting, and like I said, whether or not they really follow through on any of these plans, Blade is still out there, who knows. They made a couple jokes about that during the movie, which I thought was funny. But anyways, yeah, we'll certainly have to wait and see. So yeah, there's that. All right, anyways, guys, thank you guys so much for watching or listening to the podcast. Let me know what you thought about Deadpool and Wolverine, and I will see you guys in the next one.